شهادت روزی مردان عاشق می شود بیشک.
امروز به خود می بالد مسجد الاقصی. الله اکبر، الله اکبر، اشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شریک له، الها واحدا احدا صمدا سرمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله ارسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا. الله اكبر. تتجاوز عنهم واغفر لهم، اللهم انهم وانا لا نجد.
Iran is no doubt preparing some sort of retaliation. They have said that they will respond to Israel's targeting and the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, who was staying at a Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps guest house in Tehran, where he was visiting for the presidential inauguration, which had taken place just several hours earlier. So this was a huge embarrassment to the Iranians, even though Haniyeh himself is not Iranian. He's a Palestinian who was based in Qatar, in Doha. But the fact that this took place under their noses, that Israel was able to once again reveal to the world how vulnerable Iran is and how deep Israel has succeeded in penetrating Iran's intelligence and military envelope to be able to get into the country. According to reports, the missile was fired from within Iranian territory. This shows to the extent of Israel's capabilities, but also the weaknesses of Iran. And as a result, Iran, feeling red-faced and embarrassed, will likely feel compelled to respond. It also, the fact that the Haniyeh targeting comes on the heels of Fuad Shukar's killing, the deputy head of Hezbollah, the military commander, the number 2 to Hassan Nasrallah, his top military advisor, killed in also a targeted strike just 6-7 hours earlier in Beirut, also is something that is likely to push Iran to respond. The question comes down to, how will they respond? Will they respond directly like they did back in April, when Iran, for the first time in 45 years, fired ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones, about 350 in total, at Israel on its own in a direct way? Or will it use its proxies, primarily Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas less relevant because most of its capabilities have been degraded in Gaza? It has some militias in Iraq and Syria that it could also use. Or will it be a mix of all of these different capabilities in an attempt to attack Israel on multiple fronts, all in a synchronized, same-time manner? These are all the different scenarios that Israel is preparing for in the event that there will be a large-scale retaliation that will once again demand that Israel do something in return. And then the cycle continues and continues and continues. I think every country and every player right now is watching one another and doing their best to analyze and predict what the other side will do. Jerusalem watching Beirut, watching Tehran, and vice versa. Everybody is trying to understand what move they make. What will that bring the other side to do? Let's remember that Israel's targeting of Fuad Shukar was done in retaliation to the murder of 12 children in the Druze town of Majdal Shams on Saturday. Fuad Shukar was the man who commanded over the Hezbollah forces that fired those missiles, as well as the thousands of others that have been fired into Israel. And this was Israel's way of saying to Hezbollah, we have responded. We responded aggressively by taking out your number 2 commander, but It's isolated. It was an isolated strike meant just to kill him, nothing bigger. And therefore, we are willing to stop if you are now willing to stop. So you see also that sometimes in what you do, you send a signal and a message. What happens now will definitely depend on what the Iranians think Israel is willing to accept without trying to draw Israel into a bigger retaliation. There's no sense that Iran wants a bigger war right now. So if, for example, Iran were to once again launch, not this time 350 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and drones, but 2,000, let's say, at Israel, that would push Israel to have to fire back at Iran itself in a much bigger way, using its air force, using its own missile capability. Iran is vulnerable. Iran does not want to see its infrastructure destroyed, its nuclear facilities potentially destroyed. So it would want to do something that, again, is limited, that would give Israel a message that it doesn't have to do something much bigger. There's also a question, though, because in April it is true that in the last assault by Iran, 99% of what was fired was intercepted. But then we had a collective regional alignment, I would call it, a coalition of the Americans, the British, the French, the Jordanians. Some reports even claim the Saudis all participated in helping to intercept this volley and barrage from Iran. Will that be the case now once again? And if the numbers are bigger, even if there is that coalition, would it be effective? And if there isn't a coalition and Israel stands alone, can Israel deal with all this on its own? So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of big question marks that everybody is going to try to understand. We hear from the Americans. Secretary of Defense Austin has said that America will stand with Israel to defend it from the Iranians. The Central Command of the United States has already intercepted a number of unmanned drones that were fired by the Houthis just last night in the area of the Red Sea. So we're seeing that there is already an elevation of alert and the Americans are at the ready. But we'll have to wait to see, because let's say Iran decides, you know what, this is all-out war, and we will now give Hezbollah the order to fire and unleash its massive arsenal of 150,000 rockets and missiles that would definitely, many of them, land inside Israel. Israel would have to strike back in a devastating way against Lebanon, because it itself would be facing devastating missile attacks. We could be in for several weeks of a very, very scary conflict. Israel's decision over the last few days to go on this targeted killing campaign, taking out Shukar in Lebanon, Haniyeh in Iran, definitely one of the considerations was, what would the impact of all of this be, particularly Haniyeh's killing, on the ongoing hostage negotiations. The man who really holds the decision-making rope here is Yahya Sinwar, who is the Hamas leader hiding in some tunnel inside the Gaza Strip. And he recognizes the value of the hostages that he continues to hold on to, and knows that they are his best insurance card, and they are the only leverage he really has to get Israel to suspend and potentially end the war in Gaza. I'm not sure how much he cares about Haniyeh's elimination so much. Haniyeh was someone who has not been in Gaza for many years. Haniyeh is somebody who was believed by Sinwar to have gone over to the dark side to some extent, to have enjoyed a life of elegance and luxury, to have amassed a fortune on the backs of the Palestinian people. Some reports claim that Ismail Haniyeh had a fortune of over $4 billion, of which he kept in bank accounts in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. But the fact that he was killed does put pressure on the rest of the Hamas leadership, many of these members who are also in other places around the world, in Turkey and primarily in Qatar. And therefore, they definitely feel that any day they could be targeted. And as a result, they will definitely be putting pressure on Sinwar, likely, to reach a deal, to get Israel to cease fire, and to bring the war in Gaza to an end. This is going to be something that will unfortunately take time, though, right? There is also the possibility, though, that the killing of Haniyeh will toughen Hamas, will make it feel that it has little to lose, and it will actually slow down the negotiations. So there was a gamble here in the decision to take out Haniyeh in Tehran, and we'll really have to wait to see the impact it will have on those hostage negotiations. Netanyahu is no doubt, firstly, riding the highest wave since October 7th, since the day of that great massacre by Hamas inside Israel, which saw him plummet in favorable ratings. He is now higher than he's been in the past. And this is a result of a successful trip to the United States, including the speech before Congress, meetings with President Biden, Vice President Harris, as well as former President and Republican nominee Donald Trump. So he is showing once again his statesmanship, his leadership, and coming back to Israel on the heels of the massacre of those 12 children in Majd al-Shams. His decision to go for the targeted killing of Fouad Shukar, the number 2 guy in Hezbollah, I think shows the pressures that he's also under within his coalition. We know that 2 members of his coalition, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, were both pushing Netanyahu in the cabinet for a larger assault against Hezbollah, even one that could lead to a larger war. The decision to go for something like taking out Shukar shows that Netanyahu is trying to be calculated. He wants to, on the one hand, do something aggressive, take out a senior official of Hezbollah. On the other hand, he doesn't want to go to a bigger war, but he does need to do something aggressive to appease the members of his cabinet who want to be tougher, as well as some of his base constituency, his voters who want to see a more aggressive Israeli response. And that's, by the way, where the Haniyeh killing also comes into play. Haniyeh happens to be going to Tehran, providing Israel with an operational opportunity. Israel had decided it would not take out any of the Hamas leaders in Qatar because it would not want to undermine the talks that are being mediated by the Qataris, and that would potentially do so. So with Haniyeh going to Iran to attend the presidential inauguration, that gave Israel another opportunity, which is to take out Haniyeh, not necessarily connected to Majd al-Shams, to what happened there. But you see how one thing often does coincide with the other, and both of these events together do make Netanyahu appear strong, appear aggressive, and to some extent also satisfy the right-wing flank of his coalition.